Hello, Happy New Year for 2026, the first episode of Widnes Rugby Chat with myself, James Gordon, and Mike Parsons. We're recording this in advance of the Championship season opener for the Vikings, which sees them travel to the favourites, the pre-season favourites, London Broncos. But there's plenty to fit into this episode. We'll review the Warrington friendly, the unsavoury scenes during and after that. We'll talk about Widnes' fullback situation following the departure of Jake Maizen. There's a bit of news around the Championship and the Challenge Cup this week, and then we'll finish off, shall we say, by looking at the London game. Before we get going though, Mike, looking forward to the start of the season?
100%. It's come around quite quickly, I think. Obviously, myself and you, we've done a lot in the off-season, haven't we, in terms of interviews, carrying on the podcast. So it seems like with the kit launch and all that type of thing that, we've had plenty to cover still. Obviously, the departure of Jake Maizen, that was a massive talking point through the off-season, but all that, it doesn't matter now, does it? We've got round one to look forward to on Sunday, and although it's the challenge couldn't be any more difficult, really. It's nice to be concentrating on on-field things again.
Yeah, well, we'll touch upon the Maizen thing in a minute. Let's just go through the Warrington friendly first. So a pretty heavy defeat for Widnes, it has to be said, 50 points to 12. Warrington went a lot stronger than last year, which Widnes, of course, won the game last year, and Josh Thuley scored a hat-trick in the first half. Widnes couldn't really live with Warrington around the ruck area. Danny Walker, of course, very, very quick. And I think that's going to be that's the rule, I think, that the referees are pushing at the start of the season. I think you'll see a lot of quick play around the ruck. You'll see a lot of penalties for lying on, I think, by the sounds of what a few coaches have said to me. Warrington were the better team. I thought Widnes were disappointing. I think looking back at the game, Widnes actually started all right the first 10 minutes or so, but never really created any clear-cut chances. And then Warrington scored basically every time they got into Widnes' half, I think. I think the only time they didn't score when they had been in Widnes' half was right at the very end of the half. How did you see the game?
I thought going back to the starting lineups, it was no surprise to me that Warrington lined up as strong as they did. Purely because I think Sam Burgess is the most under pressure coach in Super League. You've potentially got his replacement waiting in the assistant coaching role. And Warrington was bitterly disappointing last year. By their standards, nowhere near good enough. So, they went full strength and they have to start Super League quickly. And I've got to be honest, ball in hand, they looked really slick. They was too fast for us. The game looked too fast for Widnes. I think just going back to the point of quick rucks, I think, having watched the Ashes and obviously the comparison to the NRL, I think for the younger generation, it's important we have a quick game. So I think for the greater good of the sport, having quick rucks will be a good thing in the long term. But obviously a full-time team going against a part-time team, that's going to have its challenges. As for Widnes, I agree with you, James. I wrote an article that I put on the Widnes Rugby website about areas and players that did well and players that did less so well. And I think the two disappointing factors for me from a Widnes perspective was, firstly, the resistance of the defence. And like you say, I have no problem in Warrington, running out comfortable winners. Rightly so, they should have. But every single time that first half, Warrington scored, and it was slick play and they looked really fluent. But even in a friendly, you want to show some steel and resistance of being able to defend your line, because round one on Sunday, you're not playing any mugs either. You've got multiple P&G internationals. You've got an Australian ex-international lining up against you. And, Jason Demetrio is an exceptional coach as well. So, it's not going to get any easier. And there was no evidence really there to suggest, Widnes have tightened up the defence for the season coming. And then the other area that I was a bit disappointed with, James, is when we did get into good ball areas, certainly in the first 60 minutes, certainly in that first half where Widnes, was obviously attacking the Widnes fans. For me, the ball movement left to right was really slow. I thought, I think Allan, praised Matt Fleming's meter making after the game, but I thought him chiming into the line, the timing wasn't right. The halfbacks wasn't quite clicking for me. I thought Jordan Abdul's kicking game was good, but we just looked a bit clunky ball in hand. And then, the last 15 minutes when, a couple of the younger players and the squad rotational players come on, I thought that's where Widnes looked at the best. But of course, then at that point, a lot of Warrington's, rotation had been done and the game had broke up. But on the positive side, I really like the size and the look of Deacon Connolly in the centres. I think there's something to work with there. And I thought Nathan Connell's transition to fullback, I thought he looked really busy in the latter stages of the game, finding space and looking a bit more dangerous. But overall, for me, I was a bit disappointed, if I'm honest. But it's only a friendly. We could be sat here next week and we've learned an abundance of lessons and we've fixed it up.
Yeah, Jordan Abdul got a bit of flack for his size, which, is probably in the modern world is slightly disappointing. But I actually thought Abdul had a decent game. I had no problem with how he played. I thought Widnes started really well off the back of his kicking game. He played 60 odd minutes. Clearly, he's someone who was on the heavy side even when he was a full-time professional. So the fact that he's not played and trained for a year and then he's coming at Widnes part-time, I think people have got to be a bit realistic in terms of what their expectations are, and he's only going to get fitter than he is. I know from speaking to Allan Coleman at the championship launch earlier in the week, and I'll put the clip of what he said in later on in this podcast. He spoke to Abdul a couple of times after a couple of days after the game, because he was a bit worried about how he might react to some of the stick he was getting, and apparently Abdul was fine, had brushed it off and things like that. But I thought, I didn't have any problems how Abdul played. I don't really want to throw any players under the bus, but what I would say is I think, and it's interesting you mentioned Connolly potentially as a centre option. I thought Widnes looked a bit disorganised, and so my thought process was that if Tom Gilmore's not there, I think Jack Owens has got to either play at fullback or at standoff or scrum half, whatever you want to call it. I think Owens should be in the middle, because they need that leadership and direction from the centre of the pitch, and I think he clearly can't offer that as much stuck out in the centres.
The thing is with that, James, you bang on, and it's not to say that it's the long-term solution, but for me, disorganised, that's the perfect way of putting it. Tom Gilmore was a massive miss. Jordan Abdul, still new to the club. Joe Lyons is not a dictating halfback. And then if you do play Nathan Connell at the back, who impressed, again, a young lad come off his time at Salford, through into the deep end there, into the deep end with Widnes. if he does line up in round one at fullback, which is the way I'd go if I was picking the team, I think you're right. Owens has to play in the halves for that voice. And not only that, when you're struggling in games and Jack's in the centres, on Friday night, through no fault of his own, for the majority of the game, he was anonymous. But when you're struggling in a game, it's not only about getting your big voices in the middle of the pitch. You want the best people, the ones who are the best on the ball. You need them running with the ball, not too out from the edge. So for me, I think whether it's at 1 or whether it's at 6 or 7, Owens has to be in the middle for round 1 for me.
And people talk about pace, and I think Owens gets a little bit unfairly. He's not the quickest, but he's not dreadfully slow. But I think it's all right saying you need pace, but if you've not got anyone organising it to get the ball to the quick lads anyway, then it's a waste of time having them. So it'll be interesting to see how it pans out over the next few weeks. The hope is that Tom Gilmore's not going to be missing for too long, but he certainly, by the sounds of it, won't be there for London. Let's touch briefly on the trouble, Mike, for want of a better word. Probably split it into two parts in many ways. The stuff that happened in the ground, and then of course the stuff that happened out the ground. Obviously, it goes without saying that what happened out the ground was unacceptable, and of course, best wishes to the lad who got hurt. I believe he's being released from hospital. I know that someone from the club's been to visit him and stuff like that. So, but I have to say, it was in some parts of it, in my opinion, have been blown out of proportion. I had a decent view of it. I was sat in the press box. I don't know what it was like from where you were, and there was basically 2 or 3 Widnes fans who had made their way to the bottom. They were trying to. Well, you've seen the videos. Everyone will have seen the videos. I know that they've all been identified, and my understanding is that they might well not be able to watch Widnes for much longer. But the steward response was poor. From what I could see, there was basically one steward. There was a gaggle of stewards, but then there was one steward who was he was the only one trying to deal with it and calm it down. And ultimately, a couple of them people get thrown out, and I just think it all blows over. But then what happened was the tension remained. I think I walked through where the incident happened maybe a couple of minutes before it did happen. And it was very notable how there was a lot of people hanging around. Like there was young lads singing Warrington songs. Stewards were sort of stood around them, but not moving them on. And any sort of crowd management control, people need to be dispersing from the back of the stand after a game. And that wasn't happening. There was almost a lot of people stood around, and then a lot of people were stood around watching them. And it was almost like there was people, in my opinion, who were there trying to provoke something to happen. Now, I'm not saying it was Warrington's fault. I'm not saying it was Widnes' fault particularly. Ultimately, the person who did what he did should have the book thrown at him. But it was just also unnecessary. And I think with better, I think Warrington could have handled it much better than they did. And I think they've got to take some of the blame for the fact that ultimately the game got bad press. And probably now there'll always be a cloud over the game. So there might be question marks over whether it gets played next year as a result of something really that, in my opinion, was quite needless, shouldn't have happened, and could have been easily avoided.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, really. I don't really have too much to add to that, James. From my perspective, the stuff outside of the ground, for me, I was head down and off. Like, I didn't see. I've only read reports, seen videos and all whatnot online, what everybody else has seen. So, unfortunately, I don't really have too much to add to what went on outside. But certainly going back to the inside the stadium, I thought the stadium was light on stewards as it was, like just as just observing. I know it's no Challenge Cup game, but you think of the police presence and the stewarding that was put on, for the Challenge Cup game. Well, surely that should have been the same level, because it doesn't matter about crowd size, it's the rivalry, and you've got the potential of, you don't know who's turning up to games and you don't know what intentions they've got, and you've got to be prepared.
Well,
It just didn't feel like that for me. I think because we've had a couple of games in the past as pre-season friendlies and there's not been any trouble. I think Warrington have probably just overlooked the game a little bit and just took their eye off the ball. And unfortunately, what's happened. But having said that, that makes no excuse. Everybody attending that game are grown men, and by trying to enter a pitch, for example, is going to heavily hit your club's back pocket.
What frustrates me, obviously I'm a Warrington lad, really. And I'm heavily involved in Warrington Town Football Club, as you're aware, and the football club has to pay to have, well, when it was in National League North, had to pay to have at least two police at every game. And yet a 4,000 crowd local derby apparently can go ahead without police presence. And you're just like,
Right.
when you look at the costs that the football clubs have to pay to ensure police are there, and yeah, that's the thing that I don't quite understand, how that can be allowed to happen. But I mean, it should, listen. Same with, I think the same with the football. It shouldn't need to have police presence. The game should be able to be managed by the security staff, and 99% of the matches that I've been to, I've been like that. I must say,
Unfortunately, James, sorry.
Well,
like stewarding, going back to stewarding, and I mean any ground. I'm not taking aim at Warrington stewards here. I mean the stewards in the Widnes ground and stewards that we go to Whitehaven, Barrow, Batley. There seems to be no stewarding standard. It just seems to be you get paid to put on an orange jacket, and it's like the security side of it. There doesn't seem to be any training, or if anything kicked off, there doesn't seem to be much presence in rugby league that it's you trust for it to be dealt with in the appropriate way.
Yeah, I get frustrated when I see comments. Oh, it's always with whatever. People saying it's always this. All clubs have their fair share. I have to say, I've been to, I don't know. Let's say I must have been to 500, 600 rugby league matches, and I can count on one hand the ones where I can really remember there being like trouble involving Widnes. And the worst one I can remember, or the worst, obviously the Challenge Cup semi-final was obviously the worst one, but the only time I've ever seen, or the worst time I've ever seen was at Warrington, where the security and the stewards weren't handling it and caused a load of trouble in the away end. And
I remember that. Yeah, Super League days.
I just think it's just so needless. But I would expect we'll hear from the club maybe a little bit more. But of course, it's a sticky situation. I would presume there's criminal proceedings involved, which could have been, by the way, much more serious than they have been. But anyway, we'll move on. You touched upon Jake Maizen before. Clearly, a massive blow to lose him in the manner that Widnes did. I understand that they found out just before Christmas he was going to have the number 1 shirt, but then, of course, when it became evident that he might not be there, that situation quickly changed. But of course, until it was fully confirmed, he had to be part of the squad numbers anyway. Otherwise, you would have had to have said, well, why he wasn't there. We've touched upon it, I think, in a couple of articles. Massively disappointing, I think, for a number of reasons. One, because he's a good player and he's got pace, which is something that is hard to come by and something that Widnes haven't got an awful lot of. But for me, it's the fact that Widnes have brought an overseas player in. he's been at the club for 8 months, so he'll have been on the payroll for 8 months, and he's played 9 games. And you're just like, do you know what I mean? Like, that was a signing that Widnes made last season that was heralded, and oh yeah, it's one to get the fans up and stuff like that. And then he plays 9 games and he's off. And I understand that there's personal reasons, etc., involved, but if you Widnes fans are thinking of Widnes first ultimately, and that's life. And ultimately, it's bad news for Widnes.
Yeah, not good news at all. I mean, firstly, trying to sort through it because there's a lot of different perspectives. There's the player perspective, which I won't go into. He's got his release, and all the best to Jake. I just hope we're not in a situation in a year's time he decides to come back and live up at Cumbria and he's playing for Whitehaven and Workington. Well, that's a different matter. But in terms of the club, massively feel sorry for them in the sense of, they've stuck by the player. Still brought him over after him, He was meant to be here a long time before what he arrived. There was obviously processes behind the scenes that the clubs had to go through. They've stuck by him, eventually got him here, helped him be homed, visas, X, Y, and Z. You then get him into a playing jersey. The pace was that. I must admit, I think in his 9 games, I don't think we ever seen him set the world alight, but you've seen him in moments. He had moments, didn't he, where his pace lit up games. I always thought we struggled with Jake at fullback attacking in the opponent's 10-metre line, where Jack Owen so often will find that final pass. Seen the winger a couple of times be free and that ball just didn't go out. But I feel sorry for the club in the sense of then we're in a position where it's like, right, next year, full season for Jake, and he'll be even better off the back of it. Everything that they did in the off-season promoting, he's been on the face of it, which is a hammer blow. The kit launch, he was right at the front and centre of that. Obviously, an overseas signing as well, something that we don't see in these parts all too often. Very, very, a very good person to sort of like charismatic and good in front of a microphone, engaging, and then for it to end like that so quickly and be stung, it is disappointing. And again, I have to raise question marks over the recruitment. Again, it's yet another player to leave so early, and I think as much as you can't help it, again, it's happened. And with this signing, James, there was warning signs. He did come over late, and I know it's a complete different reason as to why he's left. But what I'm saying is problems and no smoke without fire. And again, you've got this situation now where you're going into your season and you've not got your fullback.
The thing. I mean, I might be wrong with getting frustrated about this side of things, but Widnes haven't played a game since September, right? So Maizen's he's been in pre-season, he's been paid October, November, December, and then he's gone. So he could have left at the end of last season. There would have been no difference. So I suppose I'd question whether was there no signs that this might happen. I would imagine I don't know whether he already had a prearranged trip back to Australia, which makes this difficult to enforce. But I'd almost been at the point where Widnes should have or could have said, well, no, he has to stay until we find someone to replace him. Because you've got yourself in a situation now where 3 weeks before the first game, your fullback leaves, and probably one of your top earners, and you're scratching around trying to replace him. Well, and I know we'll touch upon that in a minute as well. But what if you don't replace him? What if it takes 2-3 months? Ultimately, he's on contract at Widnes. If he'd have been injured all year, he'd have expected to have still been paid. So why couldn't Widnes have turned around and said, well, actually, you're on contract. We need you. You've got to stay for another month or 2 or whatever it might be. Because at some point, and I've said on this podcast before that you've got to be seen to be doing right for players because otherwise players won't necessarily sign for you. But at the same time, people have got to start looking after Widnes. I've seen someone mention the Tyler Dupree thing now, different situation.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that move was terrible for Widnes in the end. And it's like at some point, people have got Widnes isn't just existing to be a vehicle for rugby league players to play. Widnes is a club that is existing to be, or should be existing to be, the best rugby club that it can be, and it's got to look after itself in the right way.
It's also got to look after its supporters, James, who are paying for season tickets.
Exactly.
And 11 when I said in the interview I did with the club with Tim Holmes, when I sold Tim 11 plays in 2 years, he was shocked of how many that was in that space of time. He realised that there was a couple of players that had left, in recent times, but he didn't realise it was that much. And you've got sponsors, you've got player sponsors paying good money, you've got season ticket holders paying good money, and you get to an end of a season and your squad looks completely different. And all right, I understand that it goes the other way as well, where the club bring in players like Ben Condon that enhances you, and it's a bit of a bit of theatre for the club, and nobody's moaning when it's that side of the coin, and I'm well aware of that. But the bottom line is of it at part-time level, the sport has a real problem of contracts because the player power is ridiculous. It doesn't mean anything. They can just walk out the door, and I don't want anybody at the club listening to this thinking I'm zoning in on Widnes, because I'm not. It's a massive problem in the whole championship.
I mean, I think it's a problem in Super League as well. I mean, you look at the lad at Leeds, James McDonnell. So he's on contract for Leeds this season, and they've already had to announce that he's leaving at the end of the year because he's going to Perth Bears or whatever. George Williams is the same. If Perth Bears get a couple of halfback injuries this year, you can bet your life they'll be knocking on Warrington's door trying to take Williams early. Not whoever he's gone to, Dolphins, whoever it is. But
I think Perth, the lad in Catalan who's come over for a season from Canterbury, Sexton, he's another one.
It's just little things like that. Like I say, it's great for the agents, but it's crap for fans because like you're a Leeds fan now. You've got a lad playing back row who is leaving at the end of the season, and you're just like, well, what's the point? What is the point? So, we move on. We have no other choice really. Now, there's been Allan Coleman's mentioned a couple of times that he's been trying to find signings. Obviously, the Matt Duffy thing came and went off the back of the Maizen thing. I think that was pie in the sky, to be perfectly honest. How on earth Widnes would have been able to put a financial package together to get him to come, I don't know, and I don't know why they would even try, to be honest. But other names, not really heard a number of other names. Ryan Hampshire was getting flicked around a little bit recently, but I think I asked. Who did I ask? He wants to play halfback, basically, so he's not an option for fullback. But as of when we're recording this on Thursday night, Widnes haven't signed a replacement for Maizen, so it looks like going into London Broncos with the players that they've got.
Yeah, I think because of the lack of names being bandied around, usually by now, me or you, James, here, a couple of names. Can honestly say I haven't. And I think also with the time scale of, after the Warrington game, expecting an announcement and then that hasn't happened. If I was to put £1 on a bet, I'd say that the player coming in, if there is one, will be a player coming from overseas, whether that's France or Australia. That's just my opinion. We will have to wait and see. But going into the London game, someone's got to have to play fullback. And, for me, I don't think Matt Fleming did enough. Alan highlighted his meter making. He's had first chance. I don't think he took it, in my opinion. He's had good games there in the past, but, I think when Nathan Connell stepped in, I think there's got to be an element of a player being able to earn a jersey off someone, and especially when that jersey's kind of free anyway. I think Nathan Connell, I like the touches that he showed. You've got the possibility of Joe Edge returning there. Of course, he was, supporters player of the season last year. So I'm sure there'll be a conversation with Allan, and his coaching staff behind the scenes. Is he the man that's going to get the one jersey against London? And then, of course, you've got Jack Owens, who's, perhaps the easy choice to just slot in there, get him back into the middle of the park. Played all of his career there. So there's four candidates, isn't there, for the London game of who's going to line up there. If it was me, I'd probably go Nathan Connell and put Jack Owens in the halves. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah. I think Edge is a better fullback than Fleming. That's my opinion. But at the same time, I don't feel like Widnes have got enough options in the centres to not play Joe Edge at centre. And that, I think that probably rules him out. Connell, I guess he's new, he's young, he played a bit for Salford last year, but he's still relatively inexperienced. Is it a big call to stick him in straight off the bat? Possibly. But again, I think Jack Owens should play in the middle. So he's got to play he's got to play at fullback or halfback. And I partly think maybe he plays at fullback this week because. I mean, by the way, I think it's ridiculous he's not got the number 1 shirt. I think it's ridiculous. I think that's a poor shout. I mean, even if Maizen was there, I just think that was I don't know. I thought that was just a bit of a needless move, but yeah. You've done a poll, Mike. What do the masses?
The fans have had the say. To be honest, it was quite tight actually. Jack Owens finished last in the voting, which, to be honest,
that shows why I know that.
Well, yeah. I mean, it didn't surprise me, to be honest, because I think. Look, I don't want to go over old territory, but I think Jack will be one of them players who his name at Widnes will be better when he's retired. I think he's one of them players that when he plays, people are the first. If things go wrong, he's one of the first to be criticised, and I think, often people miss his strengths. So that didn't surprise me from a supporter's perspective. Matt Fleming was voted third last, and then way out ahead in front of the other two was Nathan Connell and Joe Edge, with Joe Edge just pipping Nathan Connell by 9 votes. So a very close call. But
I mean, I suppose if you played Edge at fullback, you could play Owens and Fleming in the centres, I suppose. But yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's like you say, it's all unfortunate because clearly Widnes would have done all their pre-season training with Maizen at fullback and probably didn't think that they would have this sort of issue. I liked the system where they did a little bit of chopping and changing, where Owens had dropped back in at fullback on occasion, and I liked the thinking behind that. But
maybe for cohesion, the answer is, stick with Lyons and Abdul will have trained throughout pre-season in the halves. Although I was saying didn't look particularly fluent from my perspective against Warrington. They've trained together in them positions with the absence of Tom Gilmore through pre-season, and then slotting Jack Owens at fullback, who, let's face it, out of everybody is probably the person who can naturally fit into an attacking line, given he's played all of his career there. Maybe that is the answer for round 1, as in just maybe not get too smart and just stick to what you know type of thing.
Well, one man who won't be there at London Broncos is Toby Hughes, the halfback that Widnes signed from North Wales Crusaders. He's been sent out on loan to Salford, who by the looks of things are going to be in for a bit of a long season. They've also signed Will Talik from Crusaders. Now, a few people have expressed a little bit of discontent relating to Hughes going out on loan. Now, he showed okay. He did the kick, didn't he, for Connolly's try against Warrington. Now, people are comparing it, or some people are comparing it to the situation with the players last year, where Widnes had a few, 3 or 4 players who ended up leaving without playing a game. Now, there's a debate over whether Hughes should play against London, of course, but him actually going out on loan and getting game time has got to be a positive and certainly a step forward to last season. If you're going to build a squad of players, if you can loan them out and keep them sharp, then that's surely a positive.
Yeah, I was really surprised about the kickback on it, to be honest. The only area of criticism I had with the loan is I'd rather have him be going to a Rochdale or something like that, because Salford, it's almost sending lambs to the slaughter, isn't it, in the sense of they've got by far the hardest fixture run. And at the moment, without being disrespectful, it's just a group of players being through together. Now, there is an argument there to say, is that any good for development? Fair enough. But other than that point, the actual concept of him going out on loan, there's an argument of Regan Sumner and Adam Jones. The reason why they left the club was because they couldn't get any game time and they didn't go out on loan. So, when you're running with a squad of 26, 27 players, and obviously the idea is to have a healthy squad and everybody be fit and not be always down to your last 17, 18 players. If you're in that territory, then week in, week out, you're going to have players sat on the sideline not playing games. Now, you might need them players in 6 weeks' time, but it's a big ask for an halfback, for example, in this case, to come in after 6 weeks, not playing a competitive game and expect to take his opportunity when he gets chance. The fact of the matter is, there is a small argument of, would he get a jersey on Sunday? But the reality of the situation is 15 or 20 minutes at the back end of a friendly isn't enough at the moment to earn a jersey in such a pivotal position. So for me, the next best thing is go out on loan, lad. Let's see how you do. And, if Widnes are struggling and he's putting in good performances, and no doubt, Eddie, Tom and Allan will be watching his performances. If he's then playing well, then he is in a position where he's match fit. He's playing week in, week out. It's actually giving the lad the best possible chance to take a jersey off somebody rather than sat in the south stand watching the action for 6 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't a Widnes problem, but it also my thought on it is almost relating to the player pool. Is if you're, and this is where it's difficult for Widnes and for all the clubs. If you're a player like that and you're at Widnes, say, and then you get loaned to Salford and you're playing every week, what is your loyalty to Widnes? Like, why? He might go there and be like, well, I might as well stay at Salford. I'm playing here. What's the point of me going back to Widnes? And like I said, I have no idea what players think or whether that goes through their mind. But I think the nature of rugby league at the moment is that it's so easy for the players to move around that it's almost. Do you understand what I'm getting at? You're like, Widnes have signed a player. He trains a couple of nights a week, whatever. He's not playing games. He goes out to Salford. He could go to Salford and do really well, enjoy it, and then might just sit there and think, well, why do I need to go back to Widnes? I might as well just stay at Salford. I don't know. Contracts say that he can't, but I think that's the only slight worry for me is that over time, is the longevity in being able to do that? Clearly, the Salford situation's a bit of a unique one because they're desperate for players. I mean, if me and you were available on loan, we might have got an offer. But yeah, that's the only thing I think.
You'd rather have played with 16 than have me and you.
It was different. It's different when there was League One because they might not be good enough for the Championship and they can play in League One and and earn a little bit and get a bit more experience. But now everyone's in the same league. I do struggle to think about how it'll all how it'll all come together. But we'll see how it goes anyway. I think Salford are trying to sign a halfback, to be perfectly honest. So I know they've got Will Brough as well this week on loan from League. But by the sounds of it, they're trying to sign a halfback who will be theirs. Might be Ryan Hampshire, who knows. So we'll see how that goes. Moving on. Championship news this week. So off the back of Featherstone's dramatic withdrawal or booting out, whatever you want to call it, last week, it's being announced that, or it's being revealed that the RFL are going to try and replace the fixtures that Featherstone play in. Now, without us spending half an hour going through the format, ultimately, of the 20 teams in the Championship, only 12 were due to play Featherstone. Widnes, of course, being one of those teams. And if you look at Widnes's fixtures, where they played Featherstone at home, removing that fixture now leaves Widnes with a horrendous gap of, I think, 6 or 7 weeks without a home game.
Just to chuck onto the bonfire, eh?
Well, yeah. I mean, initially they weren't going to do anything. I don't think they were just going to try and compensate the clubs with the central funding that Featherstone were due to receive. Some clubs are kicking up more of a fuss than others, like Batley as an example. They were due to play Featherstone this week. They clearly make a lot of money from playing Featherstone because it's fairly local. There was talk that some clubs would get compensated more than others, which I just found a little bit weird. There was even, the RFL CEO even said that there was potential that Featherstone could come back mid-season, which was the most absurd thing I'd ever heard in my life.
Just when do you know what, James? Just pause there a second. You know when you think you've heard everything in rugby league, I bet especially in your job as well. But when you hear things like that, you think, crikey, like. When you think it can't any worse, hold me beer, Christ.
He said that on Monday, and then it's come out since then that they've explored. And to be fair, credit to the RFL for this. They're saying that they've figured out a way that they can get all them 12 teams playing 2 games each one against the same team, against a team that they're not already scheduled to play. So my early understanding is that Widnes have been paired with Ghoul Vikings. So Widnes, instead of playing Featherstone twice, will play Ghoul Vikings twice. That's my understanding as it was. However, there's definitely been some comeback from clubs involved, because what the RFL are saying is that although you will play a new team twice, it won't necessarily be on the week you were due to play Featherstone. And that's because ultimately, I put something on my Twitter about this. That's because ultimately, so like using Widnes as an example, let's see if I can get this right. Using Widnes as an example, the weekend Widnes are due to play Featherstone is March 29th. The only other the team who had a bye week that week is Barrow. So Widnes can't play. The only other team who's free on the day Widnes were due to play Featherstone at home is Barrow. Now, clearly, Widnes are already playing Barrow home and away, so they can't. When Widnes were due to play Featherstone away, the only team free on that date is Dewsbury. So what they've had to do is, because there's a number of weekends free for cup matches, they're basically trying to organise these extra fixtures on gaps that clubs already have. Now, where that becomes a problem is, well, for a start, if you get through in the cup, you're going to be playing in the cup, so you're not going to be able to play the league game. Where some clubs have also lent back is that, having already had their schedules through, they've already allowed players to have time off, book holidays. So, for instance, I think there's no championship fixtures on the Magic weekend, and there obviously isn't on Challenge Cup final weekend. So clubs have said already to players that they won't have a game. You're free to have that time off. We're not going to be trading, etc. So players have all gone and booked holidays and stuff, which, of course, they're all part-time players. So there's been some kickback on that. there's also the fact that, well, if you're using cup weekends, how early can you arrange these games? Because, like, if you're in the Challenge Cup, well, I mean, the Challenge Cup's next week as it is. If you're Halifax, you're probably thinking, well, we might get through. We're going to get through this round. We're probably going to get through next round. So already that weekend that's spare for round 4, we're probably already going to be playing. So yeah, I'm hoping there'll be an announcement about it soon, but it's certainly not going to be as cut and dry as you would like. But the positive is that at least you'll get the 24 games, because that was a massive. Well, I mean, I say it's a positive. They might end up being on Wednesday nights at this rate, but at least you're getting your full quota of games, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, if you keep digging and digging and digging, there's more problems, in terms of that game just not existing. So, like, for example, obviously you've set season ticket price at certain point, fans won't get them games, but then you go into the corporate side and the sponsorships. I think Widnes put a great post out that this sold out all the corporate packages for next season, which is brilliant. And fair play to Rolsey. But of course, I'm sure Featherstone would have been within that. So, you've got all that side of things to worry about. And then, of course, what you've just gone through there, James, it's, you kind of solve one problem and you're falling into another. But selfishly, from a fan's point of view, made up that it's looking like we're going to be getting a substitute fixture. And, for the clubs as well, because, I think Widnes are in, the way Widnes is run, we would probably be able to navigate through that. But clubs like Batley, maybe not. Do you know what I mean? It'd been a bit more difficult for them. Home games income is massive for certain clubs. So, with the set of circumstances that we've ended up with, I won't be saying this too often on the podcast, but fair play to the RFL for being able to sort through all of that and be able to come up with some compromise. But what it probably will mean, like you say, James, is, there might be some understrength sides and some upsets in them games due to players being absent. I think we seen that, didn't we, when Hunslet got promoted against Swinton in that famous game at Haywood Road, where half of Swinton's players was on holiday, and it ultimately meant 4th place Hunslet came up. You might get a couple of results like that.
Well, speaking of the RFL, I was at the Challenge Cup 3rd round draw on Monday. It was held at Wakefield at the Championship season launch. Now, originally, they were going to do the draw at 2:00, but not announce it till 4, which would have been interesting. They did come to their senses about 40 minutes before the draw was due to take place, and basically said that, because I was faced at the prospect was I would have watched the draw at 2:00. I would have known exactly who Widnes were playing, and well, who everyone was playing, and you wouldn't have been allowed to tell anyone, which is complete and utter. Like, you talk about fans and devaluing the game and stuff. I mean, how hard would it have been for them to get one of their media bods to just stand with a phone and live stream it? It's not, it was, yeah.
Only the RFL could organise a media
anyway.
and not ask any of the media to put it out.
But anyway, like I say, I only found out when I was driving to Wakefield when I got this message through, because I was like, this is the most absurd thing I've ever heard in my life. We're going to know a cup draw, and they're expecting, and bear in mind that all the clubs would be in there as well. They're expecting to do this draw, and then in 2 hours, nobody to tell anyone who they've got, despite it being a relatively, it's fairly important because, you want to know who you've got. But it's also like, there's no real reason for delaying it. Sometimes, like if you're announcing a player, clubs are doing a big announcement and they want to do it at a certain time. But there's absolutely no reason to put an embargo on a cup draw. It was the most ridiculous thing. But the good thing was that I did get to have a chat with Allan Coleman for 5 or 6 minutes, and here's what he had to say. Al, first Your reaction to the Challenge Cup draw? If you beat Sataweef, you've got Leeds, a decent carrot to get through the next round.
Yeah, it's flip coin, isn't it? Fato's big challenges beat us, so we've got to overcome that and be professional. We beat that, our big carrots Leeds, so both teams get a good opportunity for have a really good day and let the fans have a great experience. So first and foremost, we get the job done against Fato, and then we embrace it and treat it as a cup final for us. You know, if Leeds are coming, because I don't think they've been for a long while to Widnes. So yeah, it'll be something really exciting.
Slightly different to the Derby one from last year, but you showed last year against Warrington that you could compete with a decent Super League team.
Yeah, I just think the reins are off, aren't they? You know, you go out, nobody gives you a chance, and you just get a bit excited. I think what was key last year, James, was the crowd was really behind us. So in that first 20 minutes, the crowd's behind you and scores are not much in it. It just gives you another lift, a bit more energy, and you know, it takes a monumental thing to beat any Super League club, but as long as you're in there and enjoying it and the crowd's enjoying it, that's the key.
Where are you at going ahead to this weekend? I know you're talking about bringing hopefully another signing in. Do you think that's going to happen or not?
Well, we're just no reception in here then, so I don't know what I'm going out to, but no, it's very close. It's really close. Just waiting on some more details, fingers crossed, and then it can be agreed, and if it's agreed it'll be brilliant. Just think it might be a bit too close for this week, to be honest, if we can get it done. But if we get it done, it'll certainly be in place for the week after. For the week after, so fingers crossed we get the news we want.
I suppose in a key position as well, it's not something that you can just drop in, especially against what will arguably be the best team.
Yeah, I think it's really important that the players we've worked with for the last 8-10 weeks go to this game prepared, ready, knowing what we want, how we want to do things. We bring somebody new in. I think it'd be key if we can get him in and he has a couple of sessions with us and understands how close a group we are. And then, you know, with the quality hopefully he'll bring, he'll automatically come in because of what he can bring. So.
How do you envisage using the loan market this year? It's very different for everyone. The 1 week loans coming in. Is it just going to be a case of only use it when you're short on injuries? Is it going to be different, do you feel, to how it's been in?
Yeah, I just think every team's got bigger squads. So then you're going to get, I think there's a big thought process from Super League clubs where they're putting all their energy into the reserve system now to make that concept a really good competition. So if they do that, there'll be only certain types of players you can get, and that will be players who are probably Super League players but need game time and they're just not quite in their squad. So if that's the calibre of player then, well, it's different then. So if it improves my team and he's a better player than what I've got, we've got to utilise that. But if not, we don't utilise it. So it's as simple as, and they've got to be better than what we've got. And you know, I've just got a feeling if I don't want to try to disrupt something we're trying to build, but we've got to win games.
Last season, you obviously had a few players in and around this time of year that didn't make it, and you released. You've sort of got a few players in that mould again this year. Are you hoping it goes a bit different this time?
Yeah, I just think last year was, you know, without being disrespectful to the players we brought in, it was our 23, 24, 25 numbers, and we didn't have the biggest of budgets, and so we had to get what we could afford. And then I think that tells as the season goes on. So this year I feel as though our strength in depth is much better. I have no issues of throwing 25, 26, 27 number into our squad this year. I have no qualms about that whatsoever. But there'll be a couple of players probably going out in the next week or so, getting some game time where, you know, we're quite injury free, so it's vital I get the right players in early. But it's key I get the players who's not in playing games, so if we do get called in, we rather than let them go, they're playing at other clubs because of the quality they bring. So that's the difference, and I think it's very difficult as a coach to bring players in who you're going to play all year for a small amount, and it's just you just can't do it. So that's the reason there's a pattern for the last couple of years where we've had to do that, is just because if not we'd be going with 21-man squad, and you know yourself, injuries, you're absolutely shot to pieces. So hopefully this year our strength in depth will play, because there's certainly I've no issues of putting them in, but then also if they're not playing, other clubs will want them.
Is that
obviously championship clubs, but is there scope for them to play reserves for Super League? Is that something?
No, the inquiry, we've had inquiries for 2 or 3 already, which we're going to probably discuss with the board tomorrow at training, and then there might be some stuff going out later in the week regarding that, and we feel as though we're at a stage yet in their career they need to be playing regularly, and they're quality players, so they'll be in championship clubs. And that'll benefit us in the long run because they're getting game time in this competition, and as you know, everyone's playing each other, so there's no League One Championship. It'll be quite consistent with performances, so it's key for them.
Obviously, the news of Featherstone last week, sad for Featherstone as a club, but for you it means 2 less games, and you've now got to think of a 6 or 7 week window without a home game in the middle of the season to deal with.
It's just bad me. I'll be honest, I've done 3 or 4 interviews today, and same thing. I feel like a broken record. I just don't understand how you can have a competition where you don't play each other once, minimum. You know, 19 games. 19 games, assess where we are 2 weeks beforehand, bring some 5 or 6 fixtures out, and then a playoff system. It's not rocket science, it's not hard, but it is what it is. It's the same for everybody. I just can't get my head around it. And we want to increase gates, we want to increase fans. How can you do it? You've got so many weeks off. If somebody's not going to a game of rugby for 2 or 3 weeks, to find something else to do. So, as a coach, it's no different. I can't keep just flogging my players or doing this. I've got to keep them interested and somehow keep them focused. And I think in May we play on the 8th, and we might not play till June, depending on what happens. That's nearly 4 weeks. So it's difficult, but as a group, we've got to get our heads around it and come up with something what works.
And I suppose another frustration is you don't know the 895 Cup format either, so apparently that's happening. It was still up in the air, but they announced today that it's still happening, and you know when the final is, but you don't know much other than that.
No, there was rumours it was going to be played on Magic Weekend at 12 o'clock.
No, it's going to be, I think it's going to be here, Bank Holiday August.
Yeah, I believe so.
Weather will be nice.
The problem is with that is, if you've not got a destination of what you're playing, or a venue, so then there's no focus on what you're aiming for. So you're telling you you're going to be in a cup competition, you don't know how you're going to play in it, you don't know where you're playing in it, where's the excitement in it? So straight away, we train tomorrow, give my players some feedback. Well, where are we playing? Don't know. Who we played? Don't know. So, we've got to learn, we've got to grow it somehow. And, if I'm thinking that, and I'm being honest to you now, what's my players, what's the fans thinking? We're all thinking the same. So, listen, it's a date in the diary, what we'll keep free. Hopefully we get there, which would be great for the club, but don't know how to get there, we don't know who we're playing.
So that was Allan Coleman speaking after the Challenge Cup draw. Widnes being drawn against Leeds, Mike, at home, if, of course, they get past Thatto Heath. Leeds is a... I was reading something that said Leeds don't travel particularly well, but then they might make the effort because they've not played Widnes for a few years.
Yeah, look, Leeds are one of the big boys, and there's no doubt about that. I think from a Widnes point of view, it's everything you want. That the Challenge Cup for Widnes, we're not going to win it. So what's the next best thing? And I think, going back, talking about that Warrington game from last year, it helped the team, gave their all, and it wasn't too far off from being a cup classic in terms of David and Goliath local rivalry, and as a Widnes supporter, you want them challenges, you want to be going to a stadium watching, some of the best players in the country, reigning Man of Steel potentially, Jake Connor coming to town. That's what you want. But also, you want your stadium full. And, apart from the Northwest teams, Leeds is absolutely the team, you want visiting. And, I've already spoke to Tim Holmes about potentially, and look, there is absolute focus on getting past that Heath. Of course there is. But there's already conversations ongoing of, if we get to that day, making it a spectacle for fans and, having a feel-good factor around the stadium. So for me, a really good cup tie. And do you know what as well? I'm glad it isn't against like a local rival, because if Leeds do run out comfortable winners, which is expected, it'll be a little bit easier to take.
It'd be interesting to see when the game. Well, like I say, don't want to disrespect Thatawif. You'd have to say Widnes would go into the game against Thatawif as favourites as the professional side, but strange things have happened. I wonder whether Widnes might play Leeds on the Friday or the Saturday night rather than on the Sunday. Whether that's a consideration at all.
Just one on Thatawif, James. A certain Mackenzie Buckley plays for Thatawif.
Right. Well, I saw bits of their game against Seaton Rangers, and I definitely think there's potential. He's definitely a banana skin for sure for Widnes. If you're planning on going the game, it's 1,200 it holds. I've seen some people comparing it to Sheffield, which I'm no fan of Sheffield. It's very harsh on Sheffield because Sheffield have got a full grandstand there. Thatways haven't got anything. They've got the clubhouse. It's perfectly, it's a nice community club, but ultimately you're standing around the pitch. Now, for some reason, they've decided it's cash only and it's pay on the gate, first come, first serve. Personally, I think it's a risky approach, and because it wouldn't be unfeasible that 1,500 people might turn up, and whether they'll be able to police turning away 300 people remains to be seen. So I'm surprised that they've gone down that road, but hey, maybe only 800 people will turn up and it'll all go swimmingly. Widnes will win, and then they'll play Leeds in the next round.
Well, hopefully that will be the case. I do think it's a banana skin. If I was Allan Coleman, I'd be taking it very seriously in terms of my team selection. You don't want to be falling to a result like that so early on. But for me, I think because I get Thatawif's standpoint. They get to this round quite often. I think they've had. I think they've beat North Wales Crusaders, in recent memory at home, and I get the sentiment, and they want to turn it into a horrible environment for the Widnes playing team and try and cause an upset and take it seriously and professionally as possible. But I think because of the geography of the two teams, and obviously the fan base Widnes have in comparison to a North Wales Crusaders, I do feel on this occasion common sense should prevail here, and somebody somewhere should have stepped in and gone. Whether it's left to Thatawif to choose where that game's played, not necessarily back at Widnes, maybe at St Helens or elsewhere. Maybe that should have happened. I think somebody should look at these set of circumstances and go, this isn't a good idea.
I probably disagree. I don't mind it being at Thatawif, but if they're having it at Thatawif, they've got to manage it. They've got to, like I say, it might be perfectly fine, but if they're having it at Thatawif, they have to manage the process much better than just having 1,200 people turning up paying cash. Because if 1,300 people turn up or 1,500 people turn up, they're going to be faced with hundreds of people that they've got to turn away, and that could get ugly. Like I say, the comparison, they've played professional teams before, but not a team that's 5 or 6 miles up the road. So it'd be interesting to see how it goes. I think it's the same reason why the Championship teams are at home to Super League teams in the next round. Is ultimately it's a money spinner, isn't it, for the community clubs? And if Thatawif can handle it well, get 1,200 in, then it'd be a nice little learner. Be a nice little learner for them. But it's like little things like the RFL operational rules, for some reason, say that junior season ticket holders getting free for Challenge Cup matches. Now, Widnes have got over 1,000 season ticket holders. Let's just have an educated guess that 30% of them are junior season ticket holders. Now, imagine if all 300 of them rock up at Thatawif. All of a sudden, they've only got 900 more spaces, but of course, the 300 they've let in have all got in for free.
Well, that is a point actually, James, because on top of the season ticket number that's been given out, all the junior season tickets have been sold to the community clubs via the idea and the creation of what Kev Buck's put together. So theoretically, that's 200, 300 kids there.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we'll see how it goes. Right. Before we wrap up, we'll talk about this London game. I'm travelling down on Saturday night, staying about a mile from Wimbledon. I'm going down late Saturday night. Widnes won at London last season, but it's fair to say that it will be a bit of an upset, really, if Widnes were to win there this year.
Yeah, very different proposition, isn't it, James? The only thing I would say about it is, look, the calibre of player on the pitch, we already know. You know, Regan Campbell-Gillard, nine Australian appearances, 4 or 5 P&G internationals, like I've already said. The only thing I'd say is you would think without a major pre-season game and these players coming from 9 or 10 different clubs all through together, new country, you think Widnes are getting them at the time where they'll be the most clunky. Jason Demetriou spoke a lot in the week about keeping it simple. They're trying to keep the rugby league basic for them reasons. So I think if you're Widnes, you've just got to go in there, put your best foot forward, try and disrupt where you can. Take heart from performances against Toulouse last year, home and away, Warrington in the Cup, treat it a bit against the world, especially after that Warrington friendly, and just see where you go with it. So I think that's where I stand on it. I don't have any expectations. And, I think if we're being honest, I don't think Allan Coleman will like me saying this, but I think the majority of supporters will expect a comfortable London win. But Allan is very good at managing them situations and being the underdog and, putting in a good performance against these big teams. He has previous of doing that. So let's just see.
Well, partway through that, Mike, I thought you were auditioning to be a motivational speaker. You could be like Widnes' version of Big John, who's apparently going to be there. You'd have to have a few more breakfasts. I think it's a bit of a free hit for Widnes, I think, ultimately London should win their own games. They're going to be the strongest team. Widnes have gone on the theory that it's best to play them early, which is probably fair. They're friendly against. They had a friendly scheduled against Kiefer last week that got postponed. But I think London will be up for it. It's a big occasion, and I know Darren Lockyer is going to be there. It's the first game under the new ownership. First game of the season, big squad of players. They'll want to put on a. Widnes are going to have to be at the best to compete with them, and hopefully that's all you want from a starting point. Widnes compete. I mean, if Widnes go there and win, that'll certainly be Widnes will have put everyone on notice then for the rest of the season. I think so. It'd certainly be a very big statement if Widnes went there and won. But you have to say London will go into that game as favourites, and I think it's going to be one of them seasons. I'd expect them to be fairly dominant at the top of the league. I think there's an expectation that they're going to be in Super League next season. I think we'll probably see them doing what we saw Wakefield do and what we saw Lee do, where they just plough through everyone. It's almost like a farewell tour to all us paupers in the Championship while they get on their merry way.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think, for Widnes, I think my expectations will be try and put a spirited performance in and, come away with, limited injuries, hopefully none. I think, like I say, I think looking forward to the game, it'd be interesting to see where Allan's head's at with team selection, especially, with the absence of Tom Gilmore and obviously, the disruption at fullback. It'll be interesting to see where his head's at with all of that because, there's one thing, a pre-season friendly, and then there's round one. And then, of course, then it's all over to round two with, North Wales Crusaders coming to town as well. And, you want to be going into that game with a bit of momentum and some positives. You don't want to be coming into that off like a 60, 70 point hiding. And, I don't think we'll get that. We've not had that under Allan. So, here's to hopefully a spirited performance in the capital.
Yeah, right. Well, we'll wrap it up there. Hope you have, if you're going to London, have a safe trip down. I'm sure you'll have a good weekend. Thanks, as always, for listening. The Widnes Rugby League fans Facebook Facebook group, I should say, is open for your comments. Keep your eyes on widnesrugby.com, and you'll hear from me and Mike again next week. So bye for now.